Welcome to another edition of Fight News Now Extra. I'm John Pollock. Lots of news coming down in mixed martial arts, so we'll be chatting with John Ramdien and Robin Black about Chael Sonnen's newest gig, a replacement for the upcoming Metamoris event, and the sponsorship figures have been revealed to the UFC roster from the Reebok deal. A change has been made to the upcoming Metamoris event this Saturday, as Josh Barnett will now be facing off with Huron Gracie, the son of Horion and brother of Halleck and Henner Gracie. Huron will step in to replace an injured Roberto Abreu. Earlier this week, Metamoris officials announced that the show will only be available on iPay-per-view and will not be allowing fans or members of the media into the venue. The numbers for the Reebok deal were revealed by email by the UFC on Wednesday, and what fighters can expect to be paid based on the number of fights they have had under the Zuffa banner. The pay will begin at $2,500 for those between 1 and 5 fights, with escalators that grow to $20,000 if you have 21 or more fights. Then title challengers will receive $30,000 and champions will receive $40,000. Many fighters openly criticized the numbers on Wednesday, including Brendan Schaub, who states that he's made 6 figures for each of his last 6 fights in sponsorship dollars, and under the new deal will receive $10,000 in his next fight. And the pro wrestling organization Global Force Wrestling held a press conference in Las Vegas on Wednesday to announce members of their roster and announced that Chael Sonnen will be joining the promotion as an analyst. The group has yet to secure a television deal, but will be holding 3 sets of television tapings in Las Vegas with dates in July, August, and October. Sonnen will continue with his roles at ESPN and producing his weekly podcast for Podcast One. This coming Saturday night, we will present a live pre-fight show at 10 p.m. Eastern Time with John Ramdien, Robin Black, and myself getting you set for the card from Australia. And then the main card will be airing exclusively in Canada on Fight Network at 11 p.m. Eastern, featuring Stipe Miocic and Mark Hunt in the heavyweight main event. And I'm here with John Ramdien and Robin Black, who under the new Reebok system, based on your MMA career, you would have been making $5,000 a fight.
It's a lot more than I ever made before, so I'd have been pretty happy with that. Then again, I fought in the smallest shows that were just a step up from a garage with a bunch of cars with their lights pointed at them.
So like Lionheart.
Yeah, exactly. Only I was the guy getting beat up. But $5,000 for me would have been pretty nice. But I was managing Elias Theodoro for quite a while, and that kid was making $10,000 and $12,000 worth of sponsorship.
You'd be making double what he'll be making from sponsorship dollars.
Yeah, what I find interesting is some of these international guys with like...
Wait, I'd be tier 2?
You would be. You had 9 fights.
Wow.
That's right.
So Elias is going to make $2,500.
Yeah, granted, your fights were not UFC fights.
No,
but you get my
for
drift
sure.
here.
Yeah.
This, there was no perfect system to this. I think everyone will agree the rankings had tons of problems.
Yeah, of course.
They moved it to amount of fights, and I think some people were happier. But you look at someone like a Tim Kennedy, he barely qualifies here for that second tier, and then someone like Gleison Tebow, who, man, he's, I guess, hit the lottery, if that's what you call $20,000 for a fight. But I mean, this is just the new reality for a lot of these fighters, ones who were along 5 years ago where it wasn't out of the realm of possibility you could net $100 or so grand in sponsorship dollars.
Well, I bring up
those days are gone.
Yeah, well, you look at a guy like Jan Blachowicz, for example, only had a handful of fights in the UFC, but you go over to Poland, KSW is a huge promotion, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jan Blachowicz was able to get, close to $100,000, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of sponsorship money because of how big the sport is in Poland. And now that's obviously going to change. So it'd be interesting to know how some of these guys that were big on the smaller stage and they had local sponsorships, because we know a guy like Ryan Ford, for example, he gets a lot of money with local sponsorships. If he's to make his way to the UFC, that would all disappear. If you've
got a bit of a name or you're a surging prospect, is that incentive to go to the UFC somewhat hurt by this? Because to me, Bellator's looking a lot more intriguing of an option. You talk about going the Ultimate Fighter route, where you're going to go into a house and have 3 UFC fights that do not qualify under this deal. I think it really changes your mindset. A guy like a Ben Askren or a Bibiano Fernandez, if I can make money overseas, the sky's the limit of what I can make in sponsorship dollars. I think this really changes a lot of fighters who it's not just a knee-jerk reaction to sign when the UFC comes calling.
True, but at the same time, Ben Askren honestly believes that he is the best or one of the best 170-pound fighters in the world. And everybody that knows that if you want to make the most money in mixed martial arts, that means you have to go to the UFC and you have to become a UFC champion. And along with it becomes, the millions of dollars. So the only way that you can get that top prize
That
is
guy's
by
not going to
going
be making millions of dollars to sign with the UFC.
That's true, but if he goes, gets himself a title shot, wins 2 or 3 fights, establishes himself, because Ben Askren knows how to sell fights. He's got the crazy look. He comes from Rufus Sport. He was a previous champion. You come in, you have 3 fights, you fight for the title. Let's say you win the championship. That's where the money comes. That's where the money comes, and that's where most guys believe that that's what I need to get to.
Well, tell that to Demetrius Johnson, who has now got to call Microsoft and say, hey, sorry, that Xbox deal, I have to forfeit that because I'm now going to be getting $40,000 from Reebok for one sponsorship, and there goes that deal.
But I would be surprised if it's as cut and dry as it is. I would imagine there's talks with Demetrius Johnson and his management team to try to figure a good solution out, and I'm sure the UFC is going to try.
But
exactly, the UFC is
well.
discretion, though.
Exactly,
these are discretionary bonuses that some of these fighters might find their way.
The reality now is we used to compare fighting to a lot of other major sports. We would try to say, the NFL does this and fighting does that, and compare. But it's a way better comparison, right or wrongly, but just for the purpose of comparison, comparing it to the entertainment business. In music, you're a young kid, you want your band to accomplish something, you go and you sign to Sony Music, because that's where maybe one day we'll be super huge, and if we're super huge, we'll be millionaires. But if we're not, they're going to take 50% of everything that we make, we're going to make almost nothing, and we're going to be slaves. What we're getting is the opportunity to chase the giant nut. And Sony Music is going to take everything. They get all the benefit. We get nothing unless we become huge. That's kind of what fighting is like now. If you're young and you get in there, you're 20 years old, you're like, I'm going to become the UFC champion. You don't make much money, but what you get is the chance to do that. But if you're 35 years old and you're in a band, you're like, screw Sony Music. You get your own van, you get your own record company, you build a website, and you monetize all of that. And you make $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, and that's your business model.
And that's Bellator, and that's ONE FC.
That's Bellator, and that's ONE FC. The older guys, the guys with families, the guys who are looking at it just as a business, are going, how do I make the most money I can possibly make? That may be not chasing that title and not chasing gold and not chasing fame and stardom. And so I think that's the comparison now.
Many different topics that come out of this, and I think the immediate reaction from a lot of fighters is one of disappointment. I think they thought a lot more was coming their way, and the reality is far from it. Now, they're also going to get a back end of their apparel deals and fighter kits being sold, but that's certainly going to be based on a sliding scale in terms of where you are on the pecking order.
Exactly.
Yeah, brand new guy is at $40 at the end of the night. Tim Kennedy. Well, he's not that popular either. Is that $40 for Tim Kennedy? I don't know.
I'm sure we will be chatting about this for many months to come, the repercussions of the Reebok deal. But for now, we have more Fight News Now Extra. Stay tuned.